They all laughed before I did. No, they laughed while I was still smiling, still nodding, still trying to be part of a moment that had nothing to do with me. I didn't even catch the punchline. Not really. But when Celia locked eyes with her old classmate across the table, something in her face shifted. Just for a second. That's when I felt it. You ever walk into a room and instantly know you weren't invited, even if you technically were? That's how it felt. And I was sitting right there beside her, holding her hand under the table like it still meant something. Her reunion wasn't supposed to be a big deal. She told me it would be low-key, just a few friends from high school, catching up over dinner at a private room in some overpriced winery an hour from our place. She said, "You don't have to come if you don't want to." But of course I went. I always go. I'm that guy? Turns out, I should have stayed home. Everything about the night felt rehearsed. Her outfit, something she'd never worn before. Her makeup, heavier, bolder. Even the way she walked, slower, calculated. And the way she laughed at his jokes, like he'd just invented air. His name was Reed. Big smile. Polished shoes. Arms that made my hoodie look like a toddler's blanket. He greeted her with one of those long, slow hugs that lasts just a breath too long. Just enough to say I remember everything about you, without needing a single word. They kept talking in half sentences, inside jokes from a world I'd never been part of. She looked younger around him, lighter. And me? I was just the husband, the placeholder, the dull fog between her memories and her fantasies. I asked her once during dinner, "So, who's Reed exactly?" She smiled. "Oh, no one. Just a friend. We were in the same art class." "Yeah, art class. Sure." The second course hadn't even been cleared when the girl sitting across from me, one of Celia's old cheer friends, leaned over and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, "So how does it feel to be married to the girl who used to make Reed skip practice just to draw hearts on his arm?" I froze. And that's when everyone laughed. Everyone but me. Celia didn't even flinch. She raised her glass, clinked it against his, and said, "Some things never change." My stomach twisted. I think I smiled. I think I played along. But I couldn't stop hearing that sentence. Some things never change. They do. They did. And something in me knew. This wasn't just some innocent reunion. This was hers. And I was just a witness. I don't think she even noticed how quiet I got. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care anymore. That was the scariest part. How easy it was for her to act like I wasn't there. Like I was a waiter who'd overstayed his welcome at her table of memories. She barely looked my way the rest of the evening, but when she did, it wasn't with love. It was with obligation. I started catching the looks between her and Reed. The kind of glances you don't notice until you realize they've happened 5, 6, 7 times. Always brief. Always timed around laughter, or sips of wine, or when someone mentioned back in the day. They weren't just reminiscing. They were remembering something I wasn't supposed to know about. Something unfinished. At one point, Celia excused herself to the restroom. I sat alone, poking at the dessert I didn't ask for, pretending not to notice how 2 other people across the table were whispering. One of them, some guy named Carter, leaned toward me and said, "Man, Reed and Celia. Those 2 were inseparable senior year. Like, ridiculously inseparable. Surprised you even got in the door." I laughed, awkwardly, and said something like, "Well, I guess I got lucky." But I could feel my chest tightening. My throat. My hands were shaking. I don't know if it was anger or shame. Probably both. I hadn't come there looking for signs. I'd come because I believed I still belonged beside her. When she came back from the restroom, her lip gloss was reapplied. Fresh. Smudged slightly at the corner. I noticed it because I always noticed the small things about her. That's how it was in our marriage. I knew how she liked her bathwater, too hot for most people. I knew the way she twirled her hair when she was lying. And right then, as she sat down and tucked a strand behind her ear with that careful grace, I knew something was wrong. Then Reed raised his glass and made a toast. I swear to God, it felt like it was rehearsed. "To good memories," he said, "and the people we never really forget." "And Celia?" She looked directly at him and whispered, "Amen." Not to the group. Not to me. To him. The room erupted in clinks and cheers, but in my head, it went dead silent. That was the moment I realized I hadn't just lost her. I'd been replaced. Maybe not publicly yet, but emotionally, spiritually. Whatever we'd had was already boxed up, buried, and forgotten. And I was the one still standing in the graveyard, staring at a headstone that read marriage. I didn't say anything that night. Not on the ride home. Not when she fell asleep beside me like nothing had happened. Not even the next morning when she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Thanks for coming last night." It meant a lot. What meant a lot? That I sat there like a fool while they played house across the table? I started going through her phone that afternoon. And what I found, let's just say, that reunion wasn't the beginning. It was the continuation. I didn't want to be that guy. You know, the one who snoops through his wife's phone like some paranoid teenager. But that morning, while she was in the shower humming a tune she hadn't hummed in months, a tune I realized she'd started again after the reunion, I snapped. Something inside me said, look, I wish I could say I was wrong for doing it. I wish I'd found nothing. Instead, I found the truth. And it was worse than anything I'd imagined. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. Her messages with Reed were still there, just renamed as alumni group chat, subtle, but not clever. And the moment I opened it, my whole world split open like cheap drywall under a hammer. The first thing I saw was a photo. It was taken at the reunion. Not one of the pictures from the group dinner, not something innocent. This one was private, blurry, the kind of photo someone snaps when they think no one's watching. It was her, pressed up against a wall. Reed was standing close. Too close. His hand was resting on her hip like it had every right to be there. Her head was tilted back, lips parted in a soft smile I hadn't seen in months. The kind of smile you reserve for someone who still makes your heart skip. There was no kiss in the photo, but they didn't need to kiss for it to feel like betrayal. That look between them, that moment captured in pixels, it said more than any message ever could. And the messages were worse. At first they were tame. Jokes, memories, shared music links. But then the tone shifted. You still remember that spot near the lake? She'd written. I drove by it last month and thought of you. He replied, I still dream about it. And about you. The dates went back before the reunion. Weeks. Months. She'd been talking to him behind my back while pretending we were in a rough patch, not a dead end. And me? I was folding her sweaters, cleaning out the garage, making her favorite chili every Friday like a clown in some domestic circus, while she was rekindling her teenage fantasy with a guy who still used cologne named after oceans. I felt physically sick. I put her phone down on the counter, walked into the hallway, and stared at the bathroom door. The water was still running. She was in there, humming, probably shaving her legs for a man who wasn't me. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I did something worse. I started playing the game. That night, I asked her what she remembered most about the reunion. She smiled over her wine and said, honestly, just reconnecting with old friends. It made me appreciate what I have now. And I smiled back. I said, I'm glad. You deserve to feel seen. That was the last lie I told her. Because from that moment on, I wasn't her soft, spineless husband anymore. I was a man with a plan. And it started with an invitation. I didn't speak of the photo. Not the messages. Not the way my stomach turned every time she smiled at her phone while claiming it was work stress. No, I kept quiet. I acted normal. Too normal, maybe. And it was almost insulting how quickly she fell for it. She thought she had me. Thought I was just dumb, passive, the same safe guy she could leave emotionally and still keep around for tax season and tech support. But I had something she forgot to factor in, time. And silence. See, silence is the most underrated weapon. When you don't confront someone immediately, they start to build the trap themselves. Every lie she told over the next 2 weeks, every night she came home late, every going to bed early moment while she scrolled through her messages in the dark, all of it added layers to the hole she didn't know she was digging. I started planting little things. First, I asked if she'd like to host a dinner. Something small, I said, just a few friends, maybe someone from her alumni group too. She lit up at that, too eager. That's a great idea, she said, not realizing I already had Reed's full name, a few photos from his public profile, and thanks to one slip-up in her messages, the name of the hotel they'd met at after the reunion. Then I got sneaky. I called the hotel, asked if there was a charge under her card, lied about a billing error. They confirmed it. A 2-night stay, checked in the night of the reunion, for 2 guests. I didn't need to hear more. I just thanked them, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long time. I couldn't cry anymore. I was past that. I was cold. I booked a session with a divorce lawyer the next day. Quietly. Just to learn. Just to prepare. I wanted to know what my rights were. How to handle the house. The accounts. What to do if I could prove infidelity. She had no prenup. No idea. The night of the dinner, I set the table with her favorite gold-rimmed dishes. Lit the candles. Played the playlist she loved in college. Everything was perfect. She came out in a navy blue dress I hadn't seen in over a year, looked at me, and smiled like we were still in love. And then she said it. "You're being so sweet lately. I was afraid we were drifting, but I feel like I have you back." That sentence shattered me more than anything. Not because it was sweet, but because it was a lie she needed to believe. She didn't have me back. She never would again. The doorbell rang. She walked over barefoot and giggling, thinking it was one of my friends. When she opened it, she froze. It was Reed. And I swear, the way her face drained of color, the way her mouth opened but no words came out, it was the first honest reaction she'd shown me in months. Reed looked just as stunned. He thought he was walking into a date night, not a dinner party. He didn't know I knew. He didn't know I was already 10 steps ahead. I walked into the foyer, wiped my hands on a towel, and said, "Reed, glad you made it." He blinked. "Oh yeah? Thanks for the invite." Celia was shaking. And me? I was just getting started. She didn't say a word for almost a full minute. Reed stepped inside, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck like a teenager caught in someone else's kitchen. I watched her eyes bounce between us, like she was trying to decide if she could rewind the moment, force the door shut, make me forget. But I wasn't blinking anymore. "Dinner's ready," I said, walking past her like I hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of our hallway. She followed slowly, Reed behind her, every step like it cost her something. I had set 3 places, of course I had. I even poured him a glass of wine. "I hope you like red," I said. Celia always used to hate it, but maybe her taste changed. The fork in her hand trembled. She didn't eat. She didn't speak. I kept the small talk going, asking Reed about his job, pretending I didn't already know his job title, his company's address, and the fact that he'd recently canceled a second reservation at the same hotel they'd met at before. He answered carefully, his eyes darting to Celia like he was waiting for her to save him, or maybe to lie again. But she couldn't even meet his gaze. When I finally brought out the dessert, she cracked. "What is this?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" I leaned on the table, met her eyes, and asked softly, "What do you mean? I thought we were reconnecting with old friends. Isn't that what you wanted?" She looked like she was about to cry, but not the tears I used to know. The real ones. The ones that came when she saw something beautiful or when she thought I'd been hurt. No, these were panic tears. The kind that come when your lies are burning down around you, and you realize the person you underestimated is watching you from the smoke with matches still in hand. Reed finally broke the silence. "Listen, man, I didn't mean, this wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't know." "You didn't know what?" I cut in. "That I'd figure it out? That the husband of the woman you've been texting half-naked photos to might notice the way she's been gone before she leaves?" Celia gasped. "Ezra." I turned to her, voice sharp. "No, you don't get to say my name like it still belongs to you." She dropped her fork. It clattered against the plate and rolled onto the tablecloth. Reed stood up, muttering something about leaving, but I raised a hand. "Sit." He hesitated. "Then Saturday you don't get to run," I said. "You came here. You wanted this dinner. You just didn't think I'd be hosting." I turned to Celia again. "You should have just told me. You should have said you were done. Instead, you tried to rewrite your life like I was a chapter you could skip. But I was the spine holding the whole book together. And now?" I pushed my chair back. "I'm tearing out the ending." She didn't follow me when I walked out of the room. Neither of them did. They just sat there in the house we built, surrounded by food no one could taste, drowning in silence that I no longer carried on my back. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I didn't sleep at all, but I didn't cry either. Something colder had taken its place. And in the morning, I'd make sure she felt it too. She came into the guest room the next morning wearing my t-shirt. My t-shirt. Like it still meant something. Like fabric could erase what she'd done. I didn't even look up from my laptop. She stood there for a while, maybe waiting for me to snap, to scream, to say something stupid and emotional so she could twist it and paint me as overreacting. But I wasn't giving her anything. Not anymore. "I didn't sleep," she said softly. "Me neither." Silence. "Then, can we talk about last night?" I paused, glanced at her, then back at the screen. "There's nothing to talk about. Ezra, please. It's complicated. I didn't mean for you to find out like that." That made me laugh, bitter and dry. No one ever does. You think people cheat with a 5-year plan in mind? No, you just got careless. She started crying, and I felt nothing. Nothing except the icy satisfaction of watching the same person who once told me I didn't deserve her now beg to be understood. I waited until she left the room to make my first move. Bank accounts. We had a joint savings, not anymore. I transferred everything I could legally move into a separate one under my name. Then I froze the credit card she used for all her girls' nights and solo getaways. Then I called the landlord and asked about breaking the lease. Technically, I'd signed it. Technically, I was still within my rights to walk. And I was planning to. Then came the calls. Her sister, her boss, her mother, all people who adored me, all people who'd been invited to our wedding. I didn't tell them everything, just enough. Just enough to shift the image. She wasn't the perfect one anymore. She wasn't the martyr in some cold marriage. She was a woman who took what wasn't broken and torched it quietly behind a smile. I stayed another 2 days, just to watch it unravel. Just to feel the control I hadn't tasted in months. Every time she tried to explain herself, I gave her less and less to push against. I didn't argue. I didn't slam doors. I didn't beg. I erased. I deleted every photo of her from my phone. Removed her from social media. Removed her name from my emergency contacts. Even the background on my lock screen, gone. And she noticed. On the second night, she crawled into the guest bed beside me while I was scrolling in the dark. She whispered, "You still love me, right? Ezra, please say something." I turned my phone off and looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw a stranger. A tired, shaking stranger who had no idea how much damage she'd done until the house of cards started folding around her. So I told her the truth. "I don't know who you are anymore." And she cried into the pillow beside me like it was going to fix anything. But what neither of us knew, what she especially didn't know, was that the worst moment wasn't behind her. Because the next morning, someone else was going to learn the truth. And that person would destroy whatever scraps of her little fantasy life still remained. She must have thought silence was her punishment. That if she just stayed in the house, hovered nearby, apologized softly enough, I'd eventually cave. That I'd fall back into my role, the safe, passive husband with low expectations and too much forgiveness in his bones. But I was done being her comfort zone. What she didn't realize is that while she was busy trying to fix her image in my eyes, someone else had started asking questions. And they weren't as merciful as me. The call came just before noon. I was packing the last of my things when her phone buzzed twice, then went silent. A few minutes later, she stormed into the hallway with panic in her voice like I hadn't heard before. "Ezra," she said, gripping her phone like it might shatter. Did you talk to anyone from Reed's office?" I hadn't. Not directly. But someone had. Turns out Reed had a wife. A real one. Married. 2 kids. I didn't know that until a week earlier when I dug deeper into his social media. The profile he thought was private, but wasn't. She was in the background of a photo from his business trip. I had no proof they were still together, not until I messaged her from an anonymous account and asked one question. "Do you know where your husband was the night of the reunion?" She responded 12 hours later with a single word, "No." I didn't hear anything else from her after that. But clearly, she'd started investigating. And now Reed's whole house of lies, just like Celia's, was starting to collapse. Celia followed me from room to room, frantic now. "Ezra, did you tell her? What exactly did you say?" She called Reed's supervisor. She told him everything. His job's on the line. "This is serious." I stopped, turned, and looked at her like I was seeing her for the very first time. "Yeah," I said. "It is serious. Affairs usually are." Her face cracked in real time. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted it to go this far." "But you did let it happen," I said. "And you let me stay while it did. You let me sit at your stupid reunion dinner while your old friend played footsie with your memory." Her voice broke. "You don't understand. Reed made me feel alive again. I felt invisible for so long, and he remembered who I was. Before you. Before all this." That hit harder than she realized. Before me. As if everything I gave her, every little moment, every sacrifice, every boring, real act of love, didn't count. As if it all started and ended with some high school fantasy she couldn't outgrow. But she wasn't done losing yet. That evening, the wife, Reed's wife, sent one final message to the anonymous account I'd used. A photo. Not of Reed. Not of Celia. But of a printed message thread. Their thread. Screenshots. Dozens of them. All downloaded. All compiled. All time-stamped. And then the caption, "He's staying in a hotel tonight. With a lawyer tomorrow. Thank you." Celia walked into the living room a few minutes later, face red, phone shaking in her hand, whispering, "He's blaming me. He says I ruined everything." I didn't respond. Because for once, I agreed with him. She had ruined everything. And now? Now, she was finally alone. I didn't say goodbye when I left. I didn't slam the door. I didn't write a long letter or deliver some big final speech. I just packed what was mine, my books, my tools, the framed photo of my dad and me at the lake, and I left quietly before sunrise. She was asleep on the couch, phone on her chest, probably hoping Reed would call, even after everything. But no one was coming to save her, and I wasn't staying to watch her crumble anymore. The new apartment was small, but it was mine. No ghosts. No perfume in the sheets. No forced smiles over cold dinners. Just silence. And peace. I thought I'd miss her. And for a while I did. Not the version I'd left, but the version I married. The girl who danced barefoot in our kitchen. The girl who made up stories about the people in the park when we used to people watch on Sundays. I grieved her like you grieve someone who dies slowly in front of you, day by day, until only the shell is left. But grief fades, and freedom fills in the space it leaves behind. I went back to therapy. I started saying no to things I didn't want to do. I even started painting again, something I'd quit years ago because she said it was a time waster. Turns out, I'm not bad at it. A local gallery picked up 2 of my pieces last month. People pay for my work now. Imagine that. And then, just a few weeks ago, I met someone. Her name's Harper. She's nothing like Celia. She's not dramatic. She doesn't play games. On our second date, she spilled coffee on her jeans and laughed so hard she nearly cried. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. I hadn't felt joy like that in years. It wasn't loud or passionate or some earth-shattering revelation. It was just simple, quiet joy. The kind you don't have to chase or beg for. Celia reached out once. A message. Just one. It said, "Do you ever think about what we lost?" I didn't reply, because we didn't lose anything. She threw it away. And me? I found something better than revenge. I found me.